Good day, fisher folks. Brett Harris here from Trophy Tails, based in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. Today I'm going to bring you a bucktail tying tutorial. We're going to tie a very popular pattern down here in the Eastern Cape. It is an olive over white or white over olive bucktail. We're going to tie that to a 1 ounce minnow head. The head I have already prepared. You can see just on the side of me here one I've just made. We're going to take that out the vise in a second and bonk that one in. Before we get going, folks, if you're over 50, you suffer the same affliction I do. Without these things, I just don't see a thing. Right, let's get this cracking. Just going to remove the one I tied a bit earlier, put that down to the side. We're going to take the new 1 ounce minnow head, pop that into the vise. Let's get tying. Right guys, I use two kinds of binding cotton. The first is a latex cotton, which I do the under wrap as well as the binding of the actual bucktail hair, and then I always finish off where I want to with a color. And I find that these colors, the cotton isn't very strong, where this latex is super strong. So what it prevents is those irritating snap-offs. Right, so I just put a little bit of an underbind on the shaft or on the collar of the bucktail, trim off the tag end. And I find what that does is it just allows the hair to seat nicely into the collar of the bucktail. And then what I add is this Myanmar flex or flack. It has a metallic tinge to it, and I always put 2 strands of this into all my bucktails. You can see it catches the light, it shimmers nicely. And when this is busy working through the water, often when I'm fishing with other anglers, I find that my bucktails tend to get more bites, and I always attribute it to the flash that are in all my bucktails. So that I put on the back side or the belly side of the bucktail, and just secure that down with a few wraps. The bucktail that we're building, as we said, is the Gamtoos Killer, a very popular bucktail in the Eastern Cape. And the first color we're going to add to the bottom is the white. Now you can see this bucktail has tied quite a few bucktails. It's on its last, but it's a nice length, especially for these 1.5 ounce bucktails. Folks, when you're selecting your 2 bucktails on a combined bucktail, always try and find a similar textured hair. Bucktails, let's just cut off this piece. Bucktails tend to have either very brittle and stiff hairs, some of them are fluffy. When you mix 2 different kinds of material, you often find that the bucktail doesn't quite gel nicely. It puffs, or it doesn't puff, and often it tangles on the hook shaft. Right, what I do next is I pinch the bucktail hair that I've cut off, more or less about 3/4 down the piece that I've selected, and then I just fluff out all the shorter bits. Let's just make sure that your hairs are all nice and long. You don't always want the short ones. It just thickens the amount of hair that you have going onto the collar, and a little bit too much here, so we'll just strip a few more. There's a few black strands that have come through. We get rid of them as well. That should do it. It is a white head, so you can go quite light on the white, and then just add in the olive just to match it. Just trim off and neaten it easier. Okay, then you're using your thumb and forefinger, just place that on the collar. I'm going to make this quite a long one, and then just give a couple of binds down to cinch it in place. The first couple of binds are quite, although they're tight, they're quite loose. I'm going to use that then just to shape the hair. I want to create 2 distinct lines, 2 lateral lines on the bucktail when I add the second color. And you want to meet the bucktail more or less halfway down the collar. Get it nice and even. I'll just squash that down with my finger, thumb, making sure that it's nice. It will definitely puff out when I'm busy working this bucktail. Once you've got that more or less right, you can cinch it down quite a bit more. Right, that's the first color done. Right, the second color, as we said, is going to be this olive green. Okay, like any good fish, they have a dark side, a dark side on the top, so when predators are looking down into the water, they don't see the fish against the contrast. And likewise, when a fish is looking up, or he sees the white underside of a belly. So make sure your bucktails always have the lighter side on the belly side and the darker side on the top of the bucktail. That's just the natural order of fish. Okay, so we've pinched off an amount of olive. We're just going to trim that off, and then we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the white. So we've got the bucktail section there. We're just going to hold it about 3/4 down the hair that you've trimmed off, and we're going to carefully just remove all the shorter pieces. Again, I've taken a little bit too much here. Now this olive bucktail is a bit longer strands. It's actually a beautiful bucktail. I should be making the 2 and the 3 ounces with it. I'll just grab some for this demonstration. Get all the shorter pieces out. Okay, pinch that down. I'm now going to turn the vise over, and we're going to do the belly side of the bucktail. Right. So again, we're just going to more or less measure it. Make sure that the strands are about the same length. We don't want one overlapping the other. There's going to be quite a bit of wastage on this one. Like we did with the white, you just want to come around, put about 10 or so reasonably tight binds onto it, just to singe it down nicely, and it makes it workable. Okay, and then we're going to again just take that and spread it over the hook. I like to do this normally out of the vise. Let's quickly show you there. So what we're going to do here is just create those 2 lateral lines. So we're going to move the white away, work the olive down, bring it either side of the hook into the state you want it to be once it's tied solid. Inspect it as you go along. I can see those nice lateral lines forming now. Okay, and we're going to just squash it down with our thumb, get it all nice so that it creates a very clear lateral line. Sometimes it's difficult to see that on the camera, but looking with the eye here, I can see that's taking shape quite nicely. Okay, we're going to pop that back into the vise. That's our progress so far. If I pull those strands together, you can very clearly see that those 2 lateral lines now have completely merged. Alright, let's pop that back into the vise now, and continue with the bucktail. Right, the next step here, we're just going to give this a couple of more winds, just to really singe that down. And we're going to introduce the other X factor into a bucktail, which is more flash. Now, you can buy this flashing. It comes in these bundles. Zip tied together, folks. Leave it zip tied together. What I do here on these is I take 2 equal length strands. I'll just gently pull that out of the bundle. Okay, just to show you what I do here is I fold it over so 2 becomes 4. Make sure that they're the same length, more or less. Okay, so then we have 2 became 4. And then if we fold it over again, 4 becomes 8. And what we have here is just 2 loop ends, which I'll take my scissors and just trim those out. And we've got 8 loose strands back there. So here we have the 8 loose strands now forming at the back. I then turn that over, and you'll see we'll just straighten those out. It's got loops at the back. Now what we're going to do is just place that on that lateral line, and that will create additional flash right on that lateral line of the, if you look at any fish, most fish, neatly in the middle of their body they have a lateral line, which is very clear on some fish. And again, we're just mimicking nature here, so a bit of flash down the lateral line when it's working, the bucktail's working through the water. It's definitely going to get those fish turned on to give it a strike. If I turn it over now, you'll get what I'm talking about. So here we go. There's the new flashing coming into the lateral line, and look at that shimmering. Man, this together with that flat Maymar, and it's working through the water, just looks spectacular. We'll take the bucktail, we'll turn it around, pop it back into the vise. We're going to get another 2 strands of this beautiful flashing here. 2 equal strands. We're going to remove those from the bundle. We're going to take the 2, more or less line them up. They don't have to be exact, because when it's working through the water, they're all flashing in different directions. So 2 became 4. We're going to fold it over once again. Get it more or less. You can actually bring it into place with the scissors. You've obviously got 2 loop ends here, so we're going to bring those out and just trim them off. There's the other one, there's the other one. Trim that off. And obviously on the other side now we've got 2 loops which we'll leave. We're not going to cut those. Just use your finger and thumb and just roll them a bit. The stuff tends to roll up quite nicely and makes it more manageable to find the exact spot. We're going to put that on that lateral line again and give it a few wraps just to singe it down. Alright, let's get tracking here. Yeah, now we're going to give it a good couple of wraps around the collar. Some guys like it when a bucktail really puffs. And you get that effect by doing a couple of tight winds around the back collar of the bucktail, and that really puffs it up. Right, then before you're going to, you can see the effect there. Before you trim off the tag ends with a little craft knife, we're going to take our finger again and thumb, and just once you've sealed this, you're not going to be able to do it. So make sure you get the right lateral line forming, you get all the bucktail hair more or less in the area that you want it. So once you've sealed that and you've put on the sealant, it glues it down and it's rock solid. You won't have a chance of moving those hairs again. Sometimes you've got to apply just a little bit of pressure at this stage to make it go where you want it to go. But I'm happy with that. I'm going to trim just a little bit of this flashing off at the back. I want it to stick out about 1 centimeter behind the hairs, which is done perfectly. And as I said, that flashing at the back really gets the fish going. Right, there's our progress so far. You'll see the green had quite a lot of hair that I didn't use, and the white is quite tufted up nicely. Now what we're going to do is take our Stanley knife, which is, I didn't want a Stanley knife, but a craft knife, and then just very carefully find the line where the binding ends and the hair stops, and you're going to trim out the excess hair. If you look here, I'll just do a bit more. Don't worry if you nick the binding. It's a latex cotton, so you can just give it another overbind. Just pick up all the loose ends and then trim it off. Even with my glasses, sometimes I just catch the last loop of an underbind, and it unravels a bit, but it's a quick fix if it does happen. Yeah, our little bucktail's taking shape now. I'll give you a picture of what it looks like now. Make sure we get all those loose ends off. I used to do this without glasses just a short while ago. There we go, I've trimmed all that off now. There. Alright, there's our bucktail. Okay, the last thing I want to do now is I always like a bit of red colouring coming into my bucktails, or try and match the colour. And on these ones I do believe that the red just gives that bleeding effect or a gill effect to it. So what we're going to do is, whoops, one step at a time. We're going to put just an overwrap onto there, so that's just a loop of thicker binding cotton. We're going to put that over the top of your binding. We're just going to make about 5 turns. That's just going to tuck the end of that latex cotton away. Make sure that it's out of the way when we go to the next layer. Bring up our loop, pass it through the loop, bring it out, grab our tag ends, pull that through, and trim it off with your scissors. Right, here comes that red we spoke about. As I said, the red just gives it that bleeding effect or that gill effect, and it just breaks up the pattern. That together with the flashing, it can drive a predator fish quite crazy in this split seconds decision whether or not to hit your lure. You can see it pops out the colors quite a bit. You don't have to go overboard with this, just make sure that you've covered up and that there's no gap sticking through the showing the latex cotton. That tag end we just trim off nice and neatly. I'll just turn it around on the vise now. You can just see there's a little bit required there. You don't want to go too much, just enough to give it that nice red pop. Right, same story here. Take your loop of binding cottons, place that onto the top of it. And here you're going to do about 4 or 5 nice tight turns. Just enough to make sure that nothing unravels. You're going to seal this with a nice resin anyway, but just a nice way to end it off, like rod binding, or guide binding to a rod. Okay, then we're going to pull that through, grab our tag ends, pull that underbind under. See what it's looking like there now. Comes out on camera, trim that off. Let's have a quick look at our progress so far. Alright, there's the bucktail. You can still manipulate to some degree where the hairs are going to lay, but at this point it's pretty much stuck in there. The last step now is to add some resin, which I'll show you in a second. There is our Gamtoos Killer. Beautiful bucktail. Just look at that flashing coming through in this light. Can you imagine what it does in the water in the sunlight? Right, let's pop her back into the vise. We're going to do the last step. I normally do this in hand, but just for the sake of the video. What I've got here is just a bottle of clear nail varnish. You can see it's gone slightly opaque because I put in a slow hardener. I call this the Colonel Secret Sauce. But once this stuff dries, it takes about 20 minutes to cure, and then overnight it goes absolutely rock hard. What I like to do here is just put some layers onto the binding. This just makes sure that it's waterproof and that you're not going to get any rot happening on the salt water. Just protects the hairs. And I go over the body quite a bit. Just really wallop it on. The eyes is another area. The eyes come with a slight adhesive, but I glue them in with a 2-second glue or a super glue just to make sure they stay tight. But with the resin I put quite a wallop over the eyes just to make sure that they're never going to fall off while we're fishing with it. And then the other area I like to put quite a lot of resin. I'm going to come back to this bucktail and do it twice over anyway. Is on the belly of the bucktail, on the top here, because you can go and have a look at any bucktail that's been worked off the bottom, especially if there's a rocky area. And no matter how you paint or powder coat your bucktails, it's lead at the end of the day, and your paint chips off quite easily on the underside, especially, as I said, in a rocky area, or if you're constantly working it off the bottom. Okay, so there's my first layer going on. I'll just put a bit more on the binding here. It absorbs quite a bit of the coating. Let's come back and do those eyes with another. Try and get them sort of level with the bucktail once I'm applying the resin. This will take, as I said, about 20 minutes to cure. I'll come back and give it another good layer. The second layer I really just concentrate here on the binding, on the eyes, either side, and then on the belly section here, just to make sure that, you know, it's going to chip, but if you work it long enough, it's going to save the paint coming off on the bottom. Alright, and there she is. I'll quickly show you as best I can without getting my hands full of resin. There is 1x Gamtoos Killer, tied, ready for the Garrick season. Let's hope that that may bring some good Garrick to the Eastern Cape. It was a quiet season last year. Tight lines and good fishing.